如果您对 IvyCompass 还不熟悉的话呢，欢迎您到我们的网站上看一下，我们已经全新改版，给予很多很及时的信息，包括今天晚上的这个分享，我们也会录音，放到在这个1个星期以后，等我们编辑完了，会放到我们的这个微信群里头通知您，同时也会放到我们的网站上。所以网站上面还有很多其他不同导师的各个方面的分享。我一直强调，家长的认知是孩子成长的天花板。如果家长认知不够，我发现这个土壤就会让这个孩子显得很幼稚。那么在当今竞争这么激烈的一个社会当中，如果孩子不能够获得很好的引导，因为再怎么样，我们的导师都不可能像您在家里跟孩子所一起花的时间，一起分享、交流、沟通，了解孩子情况，在吃饭的过程当中，跟孩子做一些引导性的一个阐述啊。这个其实您的 knowledge 越多，您听得越多，我们叫以终为始。您把这个最后藤校所要录取的，不是说每个孩子需要去藤校哈，但是我们的观点是，如果你知道藤校在录取一个非常优秀的孩子的过程当中，其实他就在指导我们怎么去从初中小学，来一步一步培养孩子到高中，因为高中期间最后就有点像冲刺的阶段了。因为高中里面从9年级到12年级，所有孩子做的课外的活动、学校的课了，还有他的这个 GPA，都是会影响到他这个最后去一个什么样的一个学校的一个基础数据，它有硬性的和软性的。那今天晚上呢，Steve Ann 呢是我们邀请到的一位非常资深的。你今天晚上可以听到他很多很多的 insight。他自己本身呢是宾大沃顿商学院和 Emory 大学的招生申请审核员和面试官，同时还参加过 Texas 州的奥斯汀分校，还有拍旦大学的招生工作，所以他有15年以上的升学指导的经验，帮助了非常多的学校，包括今年2025年的录取结果也极其的非常的好。那今天晚上他给我们分享的主题呢，有这么3大类，其中呢是包括名校招生官是怎么来看和解读我们这个申请结果的，他来解读一下今年的这个申请结果如何，同时背后招生是什么样的一个流程和过程，他们是怎么样在 evaluating 方方面面的这个 holistic 的所有的 factor。那最新申请将在影响今年的这个12年级，马上就我们现在的11年级学生已经都开始在做这个大文书、小文书的一些准备工作哈。那么9年级、10年级、11年级怎么样来提前准备布局，来搭建 evidence 啊？因为很多家长说，哎呀，没关系，我等到11年级再来找你们。有的时候真的 too late 啊，就像我刚刚说的，它不是一个来帮你改文书就完事儿的事情，这个文书只是最后的临门一脚，前面所有的这个每一年的准备，怎么搭建 evidence， 怎么搭建你的 resume， 你想想看，你不可能就是申请工作的时候说，哎，我来了，你给我一个工作吧，而没有前面的一些铺垫和准备，那你们肯定是申请不到这个工作的，所以前面的铺垫非常重要，越早跟导师连接，实际上是越合适和越好的、越高效的。那么现在我就把 floor 交给Dr. 那个 Professor Ann。Okay, Steve, now I finished my introduction. Now the floor is yours. I am going to stop sharing my PPT, and now you can share your screen. Thank you for tonight.
Okay, thank you so much. So before I begin, let me make sure that my screen is sharing. So give me 1 second, please.
Sure.
Okay.
It's coming.
Okay, Sophia, are you able to see and hear me?
I can see you. I just don't see your PPT. Yes, I can hear you.
Right, not yet. Okay, that's fine. So thank you so much, Sophia, for having me here. And hello, everybody. I'm so happy to speak on behalf of IvyCompass. Just to add to a little bit of the introduction before I begin the presentation, I would like to add that, yes, like IvyCompass, I focus primarily on admissions for 10 main colleges. They are the 8 Ivy League schools, plus 2, MIT and Stanford. But I'm also feeling very comfortable, based on my experience, with about 120 American colleges. So most of you probably have heard of the other colleges. For example, New York University, Johns Hopkins, Duke, University of Chicago, UCLA, etc. So about 120 colleges. So with that said, I'm pleased to do this seminar for IvyCompass, and I'm going to share my screen with the presentation. Sophia, if you can please tell me if this is working fine.
Okay, sure, I will. Yes, we can see the PPT. Yes. Now it's gone.
Oh, sorry, I'm still putting it up. So
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's coming. Yes.
okay, I'm still not ready yet. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's see. Okay, are you able to see it, Sophia?
Yes.
And
Yes.
is my picture there too?
Yes.
Okay, and you can
Yes.
hear the sound okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, I apologize, everybody. I'm sorry, the technology is a little slow. I'm right now visiting the University of Frankfurt in Germany right now. I understand we have some people in California, I think, as well as in New York, as well as in Hong Kong. So if the technology is a little bit slow, please let me know, Sophie, if there's a problem. Okay. So I'm happy to discuss these following three main questions for the seminar for IvyCompass today. I'll be discussing trends that will affect the rising seniors who will apply this fall. I'll be addressing for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders as well. What are some strategies that you can do? And then specifically again for 12th graders who will apply this fall, what are some things that the admissions committees will be focusing on? And then we will have open questions at the end. Before I begin talking about each of these 3 points, I want to emphasize one thing, which is the perspective that I use is from the actual evaluator's perspective. There are many, many books, many, many websites, and there are a lot of people who are even the former dean of admissions or a senior admissions officer. These usually are not the people who review the essays, who actually conduct reviews of the activities, who look at the teacher recommendation letters, and so on. It's usually people like me who have to read hundreds of essays every year, sometimes even thousands of teacher recommendations in a year, thousands of activities, okay, reading all of the awards. It's people like me who actually look at the detail of the application and then ultimately in the final committee vote who is accepted and who is not. So even though there are many helpful resources, I'm sorry to say the dean of admissions of any college usually is not the person who will read several hundred essays every year or several thousand teacher recommendations every year. So, okay, so not to discredit them, but I do want to put your emphasis on where is the final decision in the application made. So as I start to discuss these, I want you to think about how does a student get accepted to any college, not just an Ivy League school, but any college. It is through the application. The application gets reviewed. The reviewed application then gets voted on in committee. Okay, so with that said, let me begin by discussing this first topic. What are the new trends that will affect the rising seniors? So for this topic, I have several answers to discuss. One of the points is acceptance rates and lamentations. One of the new trends is that the percent accepted students is getting smaller and smaller every year. This is a function of two things, but primarily the first reason is the number of applications, of course, is increasing. The second reason is the number of spaces allowed in the freshman year is not increasing at the same rate. And for many colleges, it is not increasing at all. If I were to show you the data over the last greater than 10 years, 2025 has not yet been released yet. These are the percent acceptance rates. So over 10 years ago, colleges, even like Harvard, were accepting around 7 or 8%. But now the most recent data shows, and these are the 10 schools that I mentioned, 8 Ivy League schools, plus MIT and Stanford. You can see that all the percentage rates, two things are happening. They're going lower and they're becoming closer together. And so this year, for 2025, and I may even write on some of these, for 2025 here, all of these are expected to be around 3.5% to 5%. The lamentations that I was describing here, that's the word for why all of the admissions office are so sad or disappointed. And the main reason is we have to reject so many excellent students. Students that sometimes we call them 16 by 5s. A 16 by 5 student is someone who took 16 AP exams and scored a perfect score on every exam. So you can imagine how high level these students are. Other students are the 1600 or the 36 students. This is the perfect score for the SAT and the ACT exams. So you need to ask, especially if you're a student, how can a college reject me if I have such perfect test scores and such perfect SAT and ACT? Everyone may be a captain or a president. Everyone may be a founder. Everyone may have excellent teacher recommendations and other parts of the application. So how can you make yourself different? That's something that I'll discuss later today. So as far as the next reason for the new trends that will affect rising seniors, the worst categories will only get worse. So what are the worst categories? Asian male and Asian female. I say this word worst. There's nothing bad about the category, but what I mean is they are the most competitive. And I will discuss later how does being Asian affect the application, and then what can you do if you're an Asian applicant to try to make yourself more competitive, or how does the admissions view certain applications from different ethnicities? If you look at this study, this is very interesting. So this was conducted by Georgetown University Center of Education. What this shows is if applicants were evaluated only on the information in the application, then the acceptance rate would be at a certain level. But once the actual holistic part is taken into account, which means the non-testing things. So for example, activities with leadership, volunteering, there's honors and awards, teacher recommendation letter, the essays, and then even the interviews. So when the other things besides just grades and testing is taken into account, then actual Asian acceptance rates are expected to be cut even in less than half. So that's why, excuse me, that's why the applicants need to focus on much more than only the grades and the testing. Another point about new trends that will affect rising seniors is comparative measures. How does the admissions committee compare Asian applicants and non-Asian applicants? That is a topic that I get asked many, many times. In English, there's a saying about comparing apples to apples. I draw that analogy to Fuji apples and American Beauty apples. So they're both apples, but they're very different kinds of apples. So usually in the open question, I get asked, how can Asian applicants differentiate themselves? Through several things. Academics is one way. That's usually course selection or the choice of major. It can also be extracurricular activity, and that can be academic extracurricular activity. For example, math team, robotics, or in humanities, it could be things like debate, mock trial, model UN newspaper. And then there are other areas that Asian applicants that can differentiate themselves, which I'll talk about later. Another point about how to compare Asian and non-Asian applicants that I get asked a lot, I answer with this. This is a very interesting study. This was conducted, as you can see down here, by Princeton University several years ago. And even though the study is dated, many officers refer to this study. So what's interesting to see, the SAT score, perfect scores is 1600. What this study shows is that, at least according to the study, an Asian person needs to score above 1500 in order to be considered the same level as non-Asian people who can score at this level. So whether you like this or not doesn't matter. And many people have criticized this study, like any study. But I do think this is interesting, especially from Princeton University, showing that there's clearly data that shows that there is a lot of unfairness to Asian applicants. So the real question is how to overcome this difference. Another trend that's affecting the rising seniors is SCOTUS. This is the Supreme Court of the United States. So many of you may not know, but in the United States, there was a famous lawsuit only a few years ago, about 2 years ago, where there were a number of students who sued Harvard University and the University of North Carolina and other universities. They claimed that they were discriminating against Asian applicants. So the Supreme Court in the United States said that colleges cannot use ethnicity anymore. Many of us in the admissions world, or those who are related to admissions, made fun of this because we know in our hearts that if truly ethnicity is never going to be considered, then probably everybody who goes into every top college is going to be, I'll say, a different demographic. And so no one is holding their breath for anything to change significantly. Okay, so with that said, I conducted a study along with other people, and two of the conferences that I belong to, I think, helped me give a pretty unique perspective about the admissions process. I don't think Sophia mentioned in my introduction, but I'm a member of two very important organizations. One of them is the American Association of College Registrars and Admissions Officers. And so this is a national organization for admissions officers only. The other association I belong to is the National Association for College Admissions Advisors and Consultants. And so that also is a national organization of people who are involved specifically in advising for college admissions. And so many of us, having discussed the Supreme Court decision, believe that the Supreme Court decision will affect the rising seniors in the following way. The grades may become even less important as a differentiator, but the grades will still be important because at the minimum, an applicant is expected to still be able to perform well in the school. I can explain this later in the questions, but the way that somebody is accepted into a college is after the application is screened and then scored, it gets voted on in committee. And the only way that it gets differentiated in committee is not by grades. If grades were a question, then the application never would make it to the final voting stage in the first place. This is why, as I mentioned earlier, we lament over having to reject so many excellent students every year. Because even though they may have perfect scores, there's not enough spaces. And so that's why we have to lament all the rejections for highly qualified students. Sorry, let me emphasize a couple of things, though, that we believe will change for 12th graders as they apply. The testing will always be important. That's one of the best ways to compare students, not only from different high schools, but from high schools in different countries. So I work with students from, I say, just about every major type of high school. So you have in the United States, there's many types of public and private schools. Internationally, you have international schools, American international schools. There's international baccalaureate, which is IB schools. There's basis, K-12, parochial, homeschooling, private magnet, charter school. So there are many, many different high schools. And so how can you really compare them all? The standardized testing will still be one of the main ways to compare. Many high schools, for example, have grades that many admissions officers believe do not reflect their true ability. I can give you a simple, amusing data point. How can everybody at a certain high school have a perfect GPA while all of their standardized test scores are below 75th percentile? So that's silly, right? If everybody makes a perfect grade in all of their AP courses, but all of the AP scores are a 3, it doesn't even make any sense. Okay, a lot of schools also have different kind of curriculae. So some schools, like a parochial school, they may require you to study only, for example, the Bible. Or some high schools do not allow the student to take advanced courses until 11th or 12th grade. So there are many differences in the kinds of high schools. So one of the main ways that will still be important for 12th graders this year to distinguish themselves are the standardized tests. Activities will become even more important. And I emphasize this with the slide I showed earlier up here with activities, because now that activities are being used to differentiate students, okay, it's becoming much more subjective. And that makes sense. If you have every student here and they all have the exact same SAT score, they all took the same AP exams, and they all have the same score, okay, everyone is the president or the co-founder or the captain of something, all the teacher recommendation letters are the same. How can you tell the difference between anybody? You really cannot, other than to look at the subjective things. So that would be things like activities, the teacher recommendation, the interviews, and even the essays, and so on. So I can talk about that a little bit more later. Okay, so let's continue with the importance of the teacher recommendations will become even more important, as especially will the essays and interviews. As far as the non-race related components, we think it may become a little bit more important, but not really. With that said, another trend that we believe will affect rising seniors is becoming a T-shaped student. So the T-shaped student is a construct from many years ago, over 15, 20 years ago. And this is something that particularly Ivy League schools thought of. If you think of the shape of the letter T, a T-shaped student means that everything that they do across the board, they do very well. So their activities, the way they participate in class, the way they volunteer, things like music and athletics and arts, etc. Everything they do very well. But there's usually one or only a few things they do very deeply. And so that's where the T is. They do everything well, and maybe one or two things, just a few things very deeply that they specialize in. And so this is where that T comes from. So not just an A student means getting the excellent grades is the minimum. As I mentioned earlier, if a school like MIT or Stanford or one of the Ivy League schools has a question about will you be able to do well in the classroom, then your application will not even get to the final committee stage in the first place. I mentioned, how does a student get accepted to a school? Your application first will be screened, then it will be scored, then the committee will vote on it. This is where you become accepted to the college. And so the scoring stage is where your GPA and your SAT, as well as all the other parts of your application, are evaluated. Once your application passes this, or if it passes this stage, then you get voted on. Many applicants fail here. Why? Because they focus too much on the GPA and the testing and not enough on the other areas. That's why these areas of activities and the essay and interviews, which are directly related to the activities, are all going this way to become more important. As far as becoming beyond the T-shape, another issue or trend that is affecting rising seniors is this concept: someone who can learn. I want especially the students, if there are any students listening to me, I want you to think about what's the difference between whether you are somebody who can learn or are you somebody who needs to be taught? What's the difference? The difference is that learning is up to you, the student. Somebody who has to be taught is somebody who can sit back, be lazy. The teacher has to stand up, explain everything, and then now the student will learn something. Okay, and so in the past, it was fine to be a student who could be taught. You do well in school, you have high grades and score well in your exams. Now the new trend is that you need to be someone who can learn on your own. You do not need to have someone explain things to you. Of course, in college, you will have professors, and we are supposed to teach and explain things to you. But the competitive colleges, we are looking for students who actually will learn things on their own. Let me give you a quick, simple example. Suppose I were to take you on an adventure and you were in the mountains for 5 hours all by yourself, and then you came back. The person who has to be taught will come back from the mountains and say, boy, that was boring. I can't believe we did nothing. The person who can learn, though, is the one who comes back and says, wow, you know, after I saw the sun go this way, I learned something about leadership. After I saw the wind blow the rocks this way, I learned something about teamwork. After I saw animals running around the mountain, I learned something about initiative, and so on. So the learning is all on your own initiative. Being taught is something that's entirely passive. And many of you, who are rising seniors, if you have not already looked at last year's applications, at least for the Ivy League schools and other schools like MIT and Stanford, number one, you need to look at the application immediately. Even though the applications will change and the new applications will come out in the beginning of August, you need to see what kinds of questions are these colleges asking. And you will notice there are several themes. One of the main themes is exactly this. Are you somebody who can learn, or are you somebody that needs to be taught? And we're not interested in anyone who has to be taught. Why? Even a bad student can learn something if they are taught well enough. The people who learn are the ones with what we call intellectual initiative. With that said, let me move on to the final answer to the new trends, and that is what versus so what. That's my way of emphasizing one of the big trends is we don't care in admissions exactly what you are either doing in terms of your studies or what your focus is, what your interest is, or what your activities are. For example, if your interest area for what is math, great. Is it physics? Great. Chemistry, biology, environmental science? We don't really care which one it is. So what I mean by the what, the really important thing is, so what? So what means how did you pursue something and why did you pursue it? So for example, if your interest is not in the STEM area, let's say it is in the humanities area. So if you're interested in history or in writing and literature or in the arts, we don't really care. What we do care about is how did you pursue it and why did you pursue it? Same thing on the STEM side. If your interest is in math or computer science or any of the laboratory sciences, fine. We really don't care that much. MIT, Stanford, Columbia, Princeton, Caltech, those are generally the most STEM-oriented schools. They don't really care if you're more interested in pure math or theoretical math or electrical engineering or computer science, software programming, etc. What they really care more about is how did you go about pursuing it and why did you decide that? And how is about how resourcefully do you pursue something. Think of it this way. The colleges, when we're looking at these high school applications, we don't expect you to win a Nobel Prize. We don't expect you to win a Fields Medal or for you to win a Pulitzer Prize. What we do expect is to see how resourcefully did you pursue something, how much initiative did you have, how creatively, how passionately, how individually, and how team-oriented, etc. How did you pursue that? And that way we can make a decision of if we admit you to our school, then we will provide the resources for you to win the Nobel Prize or a Pulitzer Prize, etc. Okay, but if that's the way you pursue things as a high school student, that's how we're going to decide, yes, we want you here at our campus because that's how you pursue things as a high school student. The why is all about motivation and passion. Many people like to use the word passion in the admissions. A lot of us think of the word passion in a very simple way. It is something that makes you act in a way that's nearly irrationally, okay? And so if you have a passion for engineering or you have a passion for writing, okay, that true passion will show because you will be probably neglecting things that you should do. You might be skipping your dinners. You might be skipping out on some of your extracurricular activities. You might be avoiding fun things that normal people would want to do in high school, and instead you pursue your passion. Okay, I can give you more specific anecdotes later if people have questions, but let me move on. And please, Sophia, if I'm going too slowly, please let me know, because I know I have a lot to cover. So there were 3 questions I'm covering. That's the first question, the trends. The second question is, if you're a 9th, 10th, or 11th grader, how would you change your strategy? One of the ways would be paying attention to this quote. I will not tell you which Ivy League school admission committee this quote came from, but all of us agree in principle with what this means. You should think that the admissions committee is saying this. We're not looking for high school kids, especially this. We're looking for young adults who have outgrown high school. So what you need to think of as you're moving from 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, and for those of you who will be rising 12th graders applying in the fall, everything you put in your application. So if you're a 9th grader, every course you select, every activity that you do, you need to think, does this show that I'm growing and maturing? So by the time I'm a 12th grader, does it show that I'm still a high school kid? Or does it show that I'm a young adult who's outgrown high school? most people don't like to acknowledge, but we really focus only on these 3 years. There's summers in between. So we have summer 1, which is S1, S2, and S3. And in 12th grade, there are only a few things that matter that we will use to make our decision. One is the course selection, the teacher recommendations, the activities that you continue, and if relevant, your test scores, if you're still taking them, of course. The interim grade report will still matter, but that is only the interim, which is at the end of January, beginning of February. One of the misconceptions is the AP exams. We do not get those exam scores in time for us to make the decision. So for you to be taking AP courses in your 12th grade for course selection, that can be a good thing, but then it has an interesting effect about whether or not you may even take the exam. I can answer that question if it becomes one at the end of the seminar. Let me move to the second point of how would you modify your strategy. So building a pyramid, what this refers to is, especially as a 9th grader, or even if you're going to start 9th grade this fall, we generally think of, in admissions, we generally think of a pyramid. And if this is 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, we expect, and again, I focus primarily on those Ivy League schools, as well as the similar schools, as I mentioned earlier. We expect in 9th grade that you experiment broadly. And after you experiment, then you narrow down your choices, and eventually you specialize in something. And if you think about this, this is similar to the T-shaped. How can you become a T-shaped student? Well, you have to experiment broadly, right? But then eventually you need to specialize in something. And so this is where you experiment broadly, and eventually you specialize in something at the top. This is the reason why students who say, oh, I want to be a computer science ever since I was in elementary school, or, oh, I want to be a newspaper journalist ever since I was in elementary school. That is the worst way to express how you may announce your decision for a major in college. I can answer that question also later if someone wants to ask, because many people often ask, is it better, especially for an Asian student, to declare a major that they think is more unique? So many Asian people, for example, declare computer science or math or one of the lab sciences as their intended major. And I get asked the question many times, is it better if they choose another kind of major? Maybe it's African-American poetry or something. Is it better to do that? Is it better to do like anthropology or musicology or something else? Is it better to do that? I can answer that if someone has that question later. But for now, building the pyramid is important because in admissions, we're interested in how people have explored who they are, what they like to study, how they think, and then they've made a decision. I'll finish by saying this. Imagine you go to a buffet, it has 1,000 different foods. You try only one food, and when you come from the buffet restaurant, you say, I ask you, what is your favorite food? And you say, oh, I only like that one food. And then I find out, so what else did you try? Nothing? Okay. The next answer to this would be quitting without stopping. What this means is, if you, again, think of this pyramid, by the time you're a 12th grader, okay, this means that there are some things that you stop doing because this becomes narrower, okay? And there's generally 3 main things that it's okay to quit, but you should not stop doing. And I'll explain what the difference is. But quitting means, for example, athletics is one of the 3. In the admissions, we understand that sports, especially in certain kinds of high schools, takes up tremendous time. And every college is focused primarily on academics. I'm not talking about some of you students who may be applying as an athlete scholar. So that's a different path. And I work with many of those students. For example, students of mine who have gotten athletic scholarships to the Ivy League schools, as well as places like Stanford, Duke, University of Chicago, Johns Hopkins, La Crosse, and so on. Okay, those are different students, but in general, we expect certain activities to fall away as you go from 9th to 12th grade, and athletics is one of them. So you can quit athletics, you can quit the soccer team or the tennis team, etc., but you should not stop playing soccer. So what does that mean? I can answer that later if someone has a question about that. Another part of your strategy should be a shift from self-discovery to utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the word actually that Stanford focused on about 25 years ago. Now everybody uses this philosophy. Self-discovery, again, if you think about this pyramid, you're trying many things. So you're discovering what are your interests, what are you good at, maybe what are you not so good at, what do you really love as a passion, and so on. Okay, and this is both inside and outside the classroom. Eventually, though, you need to make a contribution to the world. Okay, and so no college is interested in a student who will come, study for 4 years, and then just leave with the degree. We want to know, what will you do with your experience after 4 years? You graduate and then go into society. This is what I meant earlier. If you look at the college applications from even the last cycle, it will show you this trend. And so you, especially 9th and 10th graders, need to think about this. You need to think about, after you learn something, you learn it well, which means you have a high GPA and high test scores, then what do you do with it? And that's utilitarianism. If you particularly look at the Stanford and the Harvard applications over the last few years, especially last year, Harvard specifically asks in the essays, what will you do with the Harvard experience? Stanford wants to know, what do you think some of the challenges are in society that can be dealt with? MIT's application also is, how do you plan to do things that are unexpected that will still benefit society? Okay, so this is definitely something that you need to focus on. And you'll notice that this is all focused on maturity, which is this point right here about not being a kid. Okay. The last another point that I'll make about modifying the strategy is, and then what? So what this means is, after you take a course, suppose you're done with, say you're studying French, and you're done with French 3. Now what do? Well, you made an A. Excellent. Now what? Maybe you should take the national exam. Now what? Maybe you should volunteer. I had many of the students I work with, I told them to register as a translator for Mandarin and French for the Olympics that just occurred in Paris. So that's another application of then what? So you can translate. And then what? You should contact the French embassy in Washington, D.C. to see what events you can volunteer in. And then what? Maybe you can write a storybook. Oh, many of my students are published authors. So you can publish a book in French and in Mandarin, or in even Shanghainese. Several of my students have been conversant in Shanghainese. So we published books in both French and so on. And then what? And then what? So that's something you need to think of. And why are colleges interested in that? Same reason as utilitarianism. We don't want a student who will come and study and then that's it. We want a student who will come, study, and then what? What will they apply their experience on? The last of the questions, and this is the third question, and Sophia, I apologize. Please tell me if I'm going too slowly, but I'm almost wrapping it up. So this is the third and last question before we do the open questions.
You're doing great. You're doing great. Yeah, information are very, very key. I hope everyone have the wisdom, understood what you said. You bring up to another level. Fantastic. Thank you.
Well, I hope something I'm saying is helpful for somebody, but we'll see.
Yes. Even people think, a lot of thinking points.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So the third and the last point that I'll cover in the seminar is important, I think, for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders, but especially 12th graders. So what are the actual admissions committees planning? So you don't know what happens. The students do not know what happens, of course, in the admissions committee room. Okay, so that's what I'm here to try to discuss with you. How does the admissions committee think from our perspective? And it's very different from you. So for example, you may have a question of, I like the robotics or the math team, but maybe I should do the environmental club or computer coding club, or I like debate, but maybe I should do mock trial. I like journalism and newspaper, but maybe I should do the yearbook and so on. So there are a lot of different choices that you, the student, have to make that you really should know. How does the admission committee think about it? And that's really where IvyCompass and people like me come in play. Okay, because you don't need me to tell you, oh, you need to do well in your school grades. You need to do well in your test scores. If you're in an activity, try to become captain or president. You don't need us to tell you that. But some of the things that will make you different from everybody else who's doing that, that's really the key. And you're going to know that only if you hear what the admissions committee people think inside the admissions committee room. Okay, so with that said, I do think this third point, what are the actual admissions committees planning on doing this coming year, I think will help the 9th, 10th, 11th graders in their planning, but then especially the 12th graders. So a couple of answers to this. So one thing is Greater Lamentations. Unfortunately, we are planning for, again, ever higher, more competitive GPAs, test scores, and activities and awards. And so now it becomes even more important what to select. So for example, if you're a STEM student, which competition should you do? I have a list of literally over 100 competitions in STEM alone, and those are divided in areas, for example, with math. Should you do AMC, AME, USAMO? Okay, or should you do mathematical research? In the sciences, should you do Siemens Regeneron, or should you go to a summer camp like RSI or SSP or MIT Launch or Stanford Research? So, which camp, which activity should I pick? You need to have a sense of how will the admissions committee evaluate your application. And I do remember hearing Sophia mention earlier that the colleges use something called holistic admissions. If you remember the study I showed you earlier, the one that showed the graph where if it's testing only, it's this high. If it's holistic, it's this high. And so the holistic makes it much more competitive. And in order to make the right decision of which course, which activity, you really need to have a sense of how will the admissions committee think. For example, if you're already, say you're a computer science interest, and you've already done some hackathons, doing another hackathon is not going to help your application. Maybe you should do a summer camp. How should you do the summer camp? Instead of being a participant in the summer camp, maybe you should be one of the assistant instructors in the summer camp. Okay, same thing with research. If you're, say, going to do something in literature, so I want to try to balance between STEM and humanities. So for example, you want to do something in literature. So which camp should you do? Should you do Kenyon camp? Or should you do Washington DC Writers Camp? Should you do Columbia Summer School Writing Camp? Okay, Columbia has the top writing programs in the world because they administer the Pulitzer Prize. Or maybe you don't need to do any more camps. Maybe you need to do competitions. If you do a competition, which competition should you do? Should you do New York Times? If so, which one? New York Times has 6 competitions. Should you do John Locke? John Locke has 7 topics to select from. Which topic should you select? Should you do adroit poetry? And so on. So, and that's a poetry competition and so on. So which one of these activities? So the activity selection is just like the course selection. It's very important for you to decide what are the parts of your application that you will submit to the committee. Even the teacher recommendations, this is a very important decision of which teacher are you going to ask. Most students, excuse me, most students think the way they pick the teacher recommender is 2 things. Number 1, did I make a good grade? And then number 2, does the teacher like me, or do they seem to like me? Okay, if it's those two, I'm going to pick those teachers as my teacher recommender. No. If someone wants to ask about this later in the questions, I can answer this. But I would say easily, of the thousands of letters I've read, and I've spoken with many other of the admissions officers through those conferences and associations, and plus we just know each other, I think it's easy to say safely a large percentage, at least 10% of the teacher recommendation letters are actually negative. And so this is clearly a case where a student chose the wrong teacher. And many students right now are probably thinking, I'm not so stupid. I'm not going to pick a teacher who will say something bad. I'm only going to pick a teacher where I made a good grade and we like each other. That's my point. Of course, every student picks that, okay? But they don't know some of the comments that we read. And I can even share some of the comments I remember off the top of my head that are actually quite negative. A simple one before I move on would be the following. Oh, so-and-so student is clearly an excellent gifted student in math or in literature, etc., comma. And that's why I'm so disappointed in their lack of enthusiasm, their lack of class participation, and their interest only in the grades. That is a common statement in a teacher recommendation letter that will destroy your application. Even though, example, you're an excellent student in that course, it's because you're so good that often that results in a negative comment. Okay, so those are the things that most students do not think about as they're putting their application together. So even how to choose the teacher recommender, yet alone how to choose activities, courses, etc. The next point I want to make is the parts of the application that matter the most. These days, I get a lot of questions about, well, I Googled, the essay does not matter, so I don't want to waste time on that. Or the interview does not matter. Or the teacher recommendation, it does not matter. Or it does matter, or it doesn't matter. Which one is it? The answer is yes, they matter and they do not matter. So remember I mentioned that there's a stage that your application goes through. It's screened, then scored, and then voted on. And the voting is where you get in finally. So depending on the stage of your application, you'll notice that I'll make it a little bigger, things like test scores, activities, and all these other things, teacher recommendation letters, essays, sometimes they matter a lot. So the higher the bar, the more it matters. And so each one of these matters a lot at a certain point in the application process. And then each one of these, or some of these, do not matter much at all, depending, again, where in the application process. I think the best example would be test scores and grades, which is the curriculum and GPA. Okay, you'll notice that the test scores are very, very important. Of course they are. As I mentioned earlier, that's the best way we can compare somebody who went to parochial school in Germany, homeschool in Connecticut, and then an international American school in Hong Kong, and IB school in England. Okay, so everybody has a different system. Okay, but if they all take the SAT, now we can compare them. So that's why it is so important. But after your application gets to a certain stage, we don't care anymore. Okay. So as I mentioned, in the final committee stage, we don't even talk about your test scores or grades. Because if we had a question about your test scores and grades, then your application never would have made it to committee in the final voting stage in the first place. Okay, so that's why at certain times things matter, at certain times other things matter more. So for example, the essay, it doesn't matter at all in the beginning. As a matter of fact, we don't even read your essay in the beginning. Why? If you have a jail record, your SAT is 920, we really don't need to read your essay because you don't meet a certain minimum thing earlier. But later on, the essay becomes much more important. Why? Remember the holistic graph, the one with this graph and this graph. So that's why things like the essays, the recommendations, these are all subjective. These three things, these are more subjective. And so that's why it's more holistic. Okay. The next point that I'll make is the parts, and so those are the parts of the application that matter the most. And those changing priorities, they're changing the importance of all of the things that go into your application. Okay, and so what I'm going to do in the interest of time, because I do want to be able to answer as many questions as possible, is I'll just highlight that these are the main components of your application that you need to focus on. And so with that said, Sophia, I apologize for going over time, but I'm going to wrap this up and say those are the three main areas that I discussed. But for now, I'm prepared to do open questions if you like.
Yeah, actually, your information is so good, and you're not over time at all. We still have a lot of time, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah,
I
sure.
see. Yeah. Do you want to finish, or you think you are
Yeah.
open
Well,
to?
so that finishes the everything that I wanted to at least to focus on for these first three main topics. For the open questions, I do have a list of common questions that I get asked, but I prefer really whatever you want me to do, Sophia. I can answer any questions that people may be asking now, or I can begin with the common questions I often get asked, and then we can do
Yes.
more open questions. How would you
Yes.
like me to do?
Yes, yes. Let me do this. Before answer any Q&A, as our normal procedure, I am going to quickly have some advertisement to share with the audience and with the family. You mentioned about internship. And IvyCompass also have an internship program. Obviously, how to do internship, it's not just randomly doing internship. You
Okay.
need somebody to work with, like the Professor Ann, have to be somehow connected or worthwhile with your main story. So let me quickly just introduce IvyCompass internship program.
Should
You
I
see,
unshare my screen?
I think I'm already, yeah, you can unshare your screen. I'm already
Okay.
actually insert into my screen. And
Okay.
then while you answer question, I will be putting on the barcode for people to scan and have a free consultation with you. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, hold on one second. Then I
Okay.
can you showing your face again.
Okay.
So you see the internship, the content is variety. You have in finance, media, engineer, mental health, fashion, you name it, nonprofit. This where the student can be building up their maturity because they are working with the real company, startup company. It's online. It's all online. You deal with the adults. You finish part of their job. So you are dealing with not just licking stamp or pouring the, water for them or tea for them, but you're actually doing part of their project. You solve a real life issue, and it's about 8 weeks. And you practice your maturity, just like what Dr. Professor N will talk about. It's all about maturity in the end. We also have a partnership with a research company. They have a variety of research, and you have a publication. It's a little bit more money, 5,900. You have a minimum of the basic one, which is you do 3 months of research project. Research is not only for those bioscience, chemistry, or physics. You can do research with the humanity issue, social issue, economic issue, anything, you name it. We all able to find a suitable research PhD with you to help your child to build up their academic interest and strength. I just wanted to give that information to you. Right now, we have a summer application starts, cohort starts. So if you are interested in the internship and also research, welcome to add my and also Allison's WeChat. We will be able to facilitating those needs for you. Okay. In the meantime, I am going to share this barcode here. So before Dr. Ann answer questions, please, you can scan the barcode on the right-hand side. then someone like me and Allison will follow up with you. We will call you, we will contact you to arrange the free 30 minutes consultation with Professor M. So you can scan the barcode. You can tell he's very knowledgeable and know how to engage your student doing the right thing, spend the time in the right area. But if you're not ready, you wanted to stay put and continue watching, continue learning, welcome for that. You scan the barcode on the left-hand side, and then someone also will bring you to our WeChat group. That way you can continue receiving information like this tonight for continue learning. Okay, so I'm going to stay put here, and somehow, how can you show your face? Then we can go to the question answering. Can you answer question for the common question first, and then I go to the chat box? And also for any parents, if you raise your hand, stay put, raise your hand. I will unmute for you, then you can ask question directly to Dr. M.
Okay.
Okay, so Professor, do you want to go to the question commonly asked to you first?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Again, let me go ahead and share my screen and make sure that I can open this up.
Yeah. So me and you will be back and forth because I want to keep this on sharing sometimes for people to able to scan the barcode. We want people to have the opportunity to sign up with you.
So let me see, sorry. Okay, so this will take about a few more seconds. Okay. Okay, so before I start, Sophia, are you able to see the shared screen as well as myself?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm happy to do these real quickly, and then I'm happy to also answer any questions if people have any. Before I even start, I want to tell everybody what Sophia mentioned about the internships and the university level research. Those are excellent examples of what I was talking about earlier about what and then what. And then you might recall also I talked about self-discovery and utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is about after you learn something, how do you use it? Well, that's an internship, okay? What and then what? That was the theme of after you finish something like a course, and then what do you do next? You take an exam, and then what do you do next? Well, what do you do next? That's university level research. So IvyCompass, I think those two things alone, just the internship and university research, those are two excellent examples of ways that an applicant can really differentiate themselves. As far as some of these questions, I get a lot of probably maybe there's a list of maybe top 50 questions, but these are the ones that I think might be the most common for our seminar today. I get a lot of students who are worried because they have a B or they made a 4 instead of a 5 on an exam, or if they're in an IB school, maybe they have a 6 or something or 7 somewhere, or their SAT is a 1420, or the ACT is a 33, and so on. So how do I compensate for that? That's a very complicated question because it requires a holistic approach. So what IvyCompass or somebody like me, what I would do is I look at, first of all, what is your potential major? How does your lower grade affect that? Is the lower grade reflected only in the course grade, or does it also get reflected in your standardized test score? Let me give you an example. I worked with a student who had a low grade in biology in the low 70s, okay? And this is even on a weighted basis. So this was an an AP biology course. This student, if they have a low grade, as long as they have a high AP score, then that grade is not going to matter as much, because what we care about is that standardized test score more than the grade, okay? But what if that standardized test score is a 3 instead of a 5? Now what do? Now the next choice may be to look at the teacher recommendation. Is it a good idea to have a teacher to do the recommendation for a course that you had a 70 and only a 3 in? Yes, absolutely. That's very possible. I'm not saying it's always the case, but it's very possible. Why? Let me give you some examples of some quotes I remember off the top of my head from excellent teacher recommendation letters. They might say something like the following: such and such students struggled in the class. I even recommended this student drop out of the class and go into an easier class, but the student stayed in the class and she worked hard. And eventually, even though she was not at the top of the class, she was one of my best students. And this is the kind of biology student I always would want to have. Someone who will not give up, work hard, and even if they struggle, eventually they improve and learn. That is the best. We call that a golden comment when it comes to teacher recommendation letters. Okay, so that's a great example, I think, of not only how do I compensate for low grades, but also the holistic process, and then things like teacher recommendations, etc. I'll try to be a little bit faster with some of these other questions, but as you can see, usually there's not just one simple question that you can isolate. It's always part of the entire application. And why? Because that's how we look at it in the admissions committee. We look at it as a whole. How do I select my teacher recommender? I think the best way to think of it is not by the good grade or do they like you. It's what do you really think they're going to say about you? Okay. Should I declare an unconventional major to be more unique? I get this question a lot, especially from Asian applicants who are focused on STEM subjects. The answer is no. If this unconventional major is not your true interest, why not? We will know. In your pyramid, we will see the activities, your course selection, what did you do over the summer, okay, all of your awards, even your teacher recommendation letters. We'll see if what your declared major truly is an interest or not. The second reason is admissions committees are not stupid. We're not so easily fooled by someone who thinks, oh, they can pick something so obscure and now we want somebody unique. The third reason is the colleges are not looking to populate their departments. I promise you, Yale is not worried if they have enough gender studies majors. Okay, Johns Hopkins is not worried if they have enough people who are interested in international politics between Nepal and the Kingdom of Palau. Okay, there's no subject area that will be so special and unique that the college will think, wow, we really want that applicant because they want something unique. Okay, so that's the third main reason you cannot play this sort of game. There are a lot of games that I think parents and students think they can play, and in a way it's logical, but from the admissions committee perspective, it looks so foolish and silly. And so this is why I think it's so important for people to understand. Everybody knows from the student's perspective what you should do, right? Make good grades, do well in your activities, work hard, have leadership, etc. Everybody already knows that, okay? What the people don't realize is how does the admissions committee think about what you're doing? And that's really what matters, whether you like it or not. Why? Because it's the admissions committee that decides whether you get admitted, okay? So with that said, the last question I'll put here is, what kind of activity should I do? I get that question a lot. And again, this is the impossible question to answer. Well, okay, here's the magic activity. You should do Model UN. There is no magic activity, okay? This is what I meant earlier in the presentation about the what and the how and the why. Okay, if you want to be a musician, fine, be a musician. And we don't really care if it's going to be piano or violin or any musical instrument. Be the musician you want to be. If you want to do something in the STEM area, fine. Do physics or robotics engineering, or do biology or chemistry, do environmental science. Whichever one you do, we really don't care. But how and why you pursue it, that's what's going to differentiate you. But also how and why you pursue it related to the other things that I mentioned. Remember, utilitarianism, self-discovery, okay? So how you do things holistically, that's the way you're going to get in. I'll finish this last question here with a comment that I think most people are not used to saying from my side, and most people from the student side is not used to hearing, which is if you Google an answer or you ask somebody, maybe you even have a family friend who's like me. Maybe they're a professor and they're also involved in admissions, or maybe you know someone who's an actual admissions officer, or maybe you even know the dean or the former dean of admissions. Fine. Okay. But one thing, and I'll finish with this one comment before I go to the open question, Sophia. The comment is this: there's never one person that knows every single answer, myself included. So whenever I give advice, for example, I always give advice from two perspectives. If I were your Ivy League admissions officer, here's what I think. And here's what I think other Ivy League admissions officers might think. Okay. I never give my personal opinion because my personal opinion never matters. And then secondly, I never speak definitively, which means I will never say something exclusively and say, I know it and it's always like this. Because I know there's never one person who knows everything. I'll even give you a quick example and then I'll finish. You might think having a criminal record might destroy your chance of being accepted to any sort of college. Well, that's false. How do I know for a fact? I've worked with two students who unfortunately made mistakes, and they actually did have things in a criminal record level in their background. Yet I was still able to work with them. And though I love to take credit, I do think it's really their hard work and them taking my suggestions. And they eventually did do well, quite well, actually, in their college admissions. And so you cannot even say something like having a criminal record will prevent you from getting in anywhere. So my main point is this: keep an open mind, do the best that you can, try to think of what you think the admissions committee might be thinking about when they evaluate your application. Okay. And most importantly, try to at least do everything that you can. Now, for example, looking at the most recent set of applications to give you an idea. If you're a 9th or 10th or 11th grader, give you an idea of eventually what they will ask you. And if you're a 12th grader, absolutely will give you an idea, because the applications, they're going to come out in the beginning of August, which is pretty soon. Okay, so with that said, that's it for these common questions that I prepared. Sophia, if you'd like, I can answer any open questions for at least, I'd say, the next, Lucy, I'm not sure how much time, I think, oh boy. I think we have about maybe 5 or 10 minutes, is it? Or 10 to 15 minutes
okay.
for questions?
There's a lot of questions, a lot of good questions. Some of the questions you already answered. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show the barcode again. That way parents will have opportunity to scan the barcode and trying to register the time with you for 30 minutes, if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, sure.
I also see two parents raise a hand, so I'm going to pick some of the question. If answered, then I will skip that. And okay. There's one question I think representing a lot of parents were asking for. Sherry Wu asking, would you please tell more about quitting without stopping for sports? A lot of parents asking that question. Would you please elaborate a little bit more?
So I'll give some specific examples. Number one, for sports, say soccer. Okay, a lot of high schools require a student to practice every day for 3 hours, and then on Saturday, and then there's the game, so they have to leave school early on Friday, take the bus and travel to the game, or the game is at home. They still finish school early on Friday. And then on Saturdays, a lot of times they have a team building events like a dinner or some kind of team party. That is a tremendous use of time. Think about it, 3 hours every day of the school day, and then only half a day at school on Friday, and then even part of Saturday. We expect that by the time you're 11th and 12th grader, it's fine for you to quit that or to quit doing that, but do not stop. So how do you not stop? So you may no longer be on the high school soccer team. And if you made varsity junior year, you don't need to make varsity senior year anymore, because the admission committee, we're already impressed with what kind of athlete you are. Because when we see, varsity soccer junior year, we already know automatically, you have a discipline, hard work, multitask, leadership, initiative. We already have about 10 things we already know good about you. You don't need it anymore, 12th grade. So your son or daughter can quit soccer, 12th grade, but do not stop. So what are some things that they can still do? And this will show up in their essay and in their interview part of the application. They can play pickup. They can do charity events. They can help run a soccer camp. They can be a referee. Okay, so one of my students even does, he collects old equipment and then gives it to a church, and then they donate it to poor children in Peru. Okay, so those are things that are low time and effort, but high benefit. It's still using soccer. And notice that answers that question, what and then what, right? So unless, and I mentioned this in the seminar, it's if you are trying to be a scholar athlete, so you want to get a scholarship through soccer, that's different. That's a different kind of application process. But if you're simply a varsity player, you're not planning to be a scholar athlete in college, then you can quit. And I mentioned there are 3 things that we expect you to quit. Okay, so athletics is only one of them. Okay, so anyway, that's the answer to that question. Sophia, you said there were some other questions?
Yes, another one also quite good is from Momo. Could you please elaborate more on topics of intended major? For example, for Asian male student good at both engineering and humanity, should they choose humanity major?
My suggestion is, number 1, it's holistic, so I cannot say that. So I would have to look at the whole application. Number 2, in that case, from what I'm assuming, undecided might be the best one. There's 2 kinds of undecided in the admissions mind. There's good undecided and bad undecided. So the bad undecided is, I don't know what I want to major in because I haven't really thought about it. The good, that's the bad undecided. The good undecided is, I don't know what I want to major in between math, literature, social studies, psychology, and international affairs. That's the good undecided. Okay, so if you're strong in more than one area and they're very different areas, then that can be the good undecided. The third and final part of my answer to that question is, there's still, especially the Ivy League school, some of them are a little different. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, there's still more the traditional philosophy of a broad liberal arts. So they want you to be undecided. For example, Yale, if you look on the application, they ask you for 3 potential majors. And they even emphasize, we don't want you to tell us what you decided. We only want you to tell us, what do you think maybe you might be interested in? Okay, and that's Yale. Princeton, they don't want to even hear what you think you want to major in until after a sophomore year. That's after 2 years. Harvard, same thing. If you want to declare early, that's fine. But they're happy you don't even know what you want to major in until after 2 years. The main reason for that is a lot of the more traditional Ivies, the traditional philosophy is they want you to be an intellectual first. You are a T-shaped and you do everything intellectually well, except for that maybe one thing you specialize in, which you eventually can discover later. The second thing is if you speak with any, especially Ivy League student, after even the first semester, so of course the first year, but even after the first semester, you can ask any Ivy League student or go on YouTube and look for, what do after first year freshmen, how has their mind changed? Everyone says the same thing. Oh, in high school, I thought I knew exactly, I want to do this, this, and this. But then after only 1 semester in college, everything has changed. Okay, and we know that. The admissions people know this. So that's why the undecided is perfectly fine. And then the last thing I'll mention, the fourth and last thing I'll mention is a lot of the Ivies, they vary. So some of them are a little bit more vocational and utilitarian. For example, Princeton and Columbia. Princeton is both, philosophical, but they also reward the utilitarian. Columbia, definitely. Dartmouth, definitely. Cornell, definitely vocational and utilitarian. UPenn, I would say, is both, because UPenn has engineering and Wharton, but then they also have the CAS, which is the College of Arts and Science. So some of the Ivies are kind of on a scale. Some of them are very traditional philosophical, like I'll say Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Others are a little bit more in between, maybe like UPenn and Princeton again. And then others are a little bit more on utilitarian side, as I mentioned, like Dartmouth, Columbia. Okay, so it varies. Yeah.
Thank you. I think that answers question. A lot of parents, especially Chinese background parents, are so keen in on, how the student coming out, looking for a major and also job, career. And so they very, very hooked on the major. Actually, I totally personally agree with you. As young adults, they change their mind, which is good. I remember college dean tell us the students should be learning broad, not deep, because they're still changing their mind, they're still learning, they're still young. So I really echo what
Sure,
you're saying. Very echo.
sure.
Um,
Mhm.
One more question from a student says,
Yeah.
I am a performing musician and have played in bands at the 9th, 10th, and first half of 11th grade. However, due to schedule conflict, I stopped doing it. Would it be red flag in AO's eyes if music is one of my intended area? Does it change the answer? By the way, I keep participating competitions and winning awards. What can I do to fill that gap if that presents a problem?
Yes. So that I get that question often. So a couple things. Again, number one, in order for me to really answer that question for this particular student, again, of course, I would have to look at the whole application. Number two, here are a couple of options based on some assumptions I'm making. You may want to declare as a double major or as a minor music. You may also want to declare that there are other things that colleges have besides just a double major or a minor. They have a concentration, they have a certificate. Okay, so there are other things that you can also declare. The other decision you need to make is, are you going to apply to a fine arts school? So, for example, the Manhattan School of Music or Juilliard or the Curtis Institute. As you can tell, I've worked with a lot of students who apply to music school as well. If you're a woman, Barnard College is the fine arts college connected to Columbia, which is one of the top Ivy League schools. So it depends on, again, are you going to pursue music school or not, particularly as a potential career? The third thing that I'll answer about that is you said that you're continuing to do competitions, et cetera, and that's excellent. Okay, you need to consider doing yet another competition may not be that much more beneficial. There's one word that most admissions people use. That word is incremental. Is what you're doing incremental? And I don't have time to explain it, but I'm sure you can look it up if you don't already know what it means. So is it incremental? And so if you want to do another competition, that's fine. But after you've placed top 50 in the international Tchaikovsky competition, there's nowhere higher for you to go, right? So you might consider, remember in my presentation, I made the statement, what, and then what? So with the music, fine. Let me give you examples of some things that some of my students, I've encouraged them to do. All of my students who do music, they now compose. They also do arranging. They also are what you call creators. So Spotify creators is a really popular channel. Everybody knows Spotify, but not everybody knows Spotify creators. Okay, publishing your compositions, performing charity events, organizing charity events. IvyCompass is a 501c3. A lot of my students, I've encouraged them to create their own 501c3 through charity music events. Some of my students teach music, but that's a simple thing. I have one student, I convinced her to teach cello to deaf children. So can you think of anything more difficult than to teach children who cannot even hear how to play the cello? Okay, so that's what I mean by, it's, IvyCompass and people like me, it's our job to think of ways for you to really distinguish yourself, when you're kind of stuck feeling, okay, well, I've already won this. I'm already playing for the Youth Symphony Orchestra for Chicago or New York or Los Angeles, wherever you are. I've already done the Youth Symphony Orchestra. I also already qualified for the Youth Civic Orchestra. Okay, I'm also principal violinist or flutist or whatever. So what next? Okay, so again, being principal violinist for 3 years is not incremental over doing it for 2 years. Okay, so it's the same thing like with the soccer and varsity. Once you're soccer varsity, we already know now who you are. You don't need to have another year, really. It's not incremental. So the real question is, what next? Okay, and so that's where I think IvyCompass and people like me can come in. Sophia and Fan, I think I have time for only about maybe one more question, if that's okay.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
apologize. I know I speak too much.
No. You
Yeah.
all information I receive actually. There's so many information. There's so many questions there. Yeah. Usually we IvyCompass AFI our presentation usually lasts 2 hours, but I will try.
Okay.
If you think your question is very specific, I saw a lot of questions parents are asking about my child, my son. You can scan the barcode on the right-hand side. We will offer you 30 minutes of free consultation with Professor An to get to know you and get to know him better. That's opportunity for you to further asking your personal questions and determine if it's the right fit for your child to have someone so intelligent to coach your student to in this journey become a more intelligent, mature person. Let me asking, one more question. Um, how would the AI technology impact the screening and also scoring process? Thank you.
Yeah, that's pretty simple. So we've been anticipating AI, I'd say for about, in my experiences, the last 7 years. Okay, so I think right now it's become more mainstream, but for us it's old. So we're already used to it, number one. Number two, don't you dare consider using AI in any aspect of your application because it will be caught. Okay, number three, even if you use AI and you get away with it, here's the risk. For the rest of your life, you will never sleep peacefully because every application reserves the right to rescind any acceptance all the way up to including through the conferral of a degree. So you may get your PhD even eventually, okay? But if they found out 30 years ago you used AI and cheated, all of that is going to be thrown away. So that's the third point that I'll make. The fourth point that I'll make is the colleges, it depends, some of the colleges, of course, have a varying use of it. Okay, but for example, the schools I've been involved with reviewing applications, so that's been Pepperdine, University of Texas, University of Georgia, of course, Emory. My Ivy League school is University of Pennsylvania, and specifically I do Wharton because that's where I went. But we've been using different forms of AI to also catch things that look like what we call anomalies, things that do not look like they were consistent and natural with the rest of the application. I can even give a couple real quick examples. Some of them are really funny. For example, if a student even had to take TOEFL exam because they have an ESL, English as a second language, right? And we can tell some of their application is not written very clearly. And that's okay, because that's another myth. People do not understand perfect grammar is not necessary. Okay, especially if you're not English as the main language. Okay, but then we read the essay and everything is perfect grammar. Everything is the funniest. It's not. I shouldn't say it's funny. It's actually kind of sad. Many of us, and myself included, many of us who are not official admissions officers, but we still review essays and applications and content. A lot of us are professional writers and readers. I myself am an editor, as well as a newspaper journalist and former managing editor and writer, etc. A lot of people, we can tell, did a lawyer write this? Did a newspaper journalist write this? Did an English teacher write? English teachers, this is funny, English teachers write the worst essays, by the way, okay? Because the essay is very different for the college application than it is for your AP literature, AP language, or composition essay, or for your AP US, APUSH, World, Euro, that kind of writing for your DBQ or your SRQ or FRQs, that's very different kind of writing than for the essay. That's a question I get a lot, which is how important is the essay and how does the essay get scored? There are 5 main things that contribute to your essay. First of all, the essay is very important, as you saw, for your application. But there are 5 main things that contribute to your essay score. The 5th one is your answer. That's the last one we care about, is your actual answer to the question. So then you need to think about what are the other 4 things that contribute to your essay score if it's not the answer. And think about it. We've read we've read thousands of essays for so many years. There's no answer you can tell us that we never read before. Okay, so there's a lot of other things and these are the things that IvyCompass and people like me can actually advise you on what are these other things that the admissions essay evaluator is really looking for. What does it really show about you, other than your answer? So anyway, I didn't mean to get a little bit off the topic, but it's somewhat related, with the essay and the AI, because the AI usually focuses on the writing part of it. Lucy or Fan,
Yes.
I don't think I have time for one more question, Sophia, so I apologize.
Can we just do one more because
Lucy?
The audience.
Yeah. I saw
Lucy, can you just answer one more?
Sure.
I tell the audience unmute themselves. So either Brian, I can only take one, Brian or Carrie. Can you just answer one?
Sure.
Brian or Carrie, are you there? So either whoever you able to unmute yourself and ask questions. That's the last one.
Can you hear me? This is
Carrie. Yes.
Okay. Hi, Professor. My question is regarding late starters. Like, some boys that their maturity doesn't match with their age. So like, even though they're 12th grade, but it's kind of like their full potential is not there yet. Maybe a year or two later they will be there, but they're at the big disadvantage at this point. Any advice for that?
Sure. So a couple of things. Number one, that's very common. I would estimate at least 25% of accepted students are like that. Okay. Number two, it's so common. We have a slang word for those kinds of students. Those students, we call them late discoverer. So that means they discovered what do they love, what is their passion, what are they good at. They discover that later, and that's fine. Okay, so that's number two. Number three is that makes the S3. So I said there's three summers, S1, S2, S3. So that makes the S3 all the more important. What are you going to do in that S3? So it's very important to select the right activity at the right level, and don't pick a summer camp that's 3 weeks. It's otherwise you cannot do this competition. Are you doing the right individual project? Like, are you going to publish something, or are you going to get a referee license, or are you going to be an assistant instructor at a camp? What is it you're going to do on your own? That's also very important. And then I'll say the fourth and final thing to the late discoverer is that makes the selection of the other things, especially the essay, what if the interview happens, what they say in the interview, and then the teacher recommendation. Okay, there's certain ways that you can ask the teacher when you ask, can you write the teacher recommendation letter, so that the teacher will effectively allow the student to put in most of the content. So a lot of that content should also be consistent with what a late discoverer does. So there's nothing wrong with a late discoverer. We even have many examples. Winston Churchill was a late discoverer. Albert Einstein, late discoverer. Yo-Yo Ma, he was a cellist, late discoverer. So there's so many late discoverers. So that's perfectly fine. That's not a worry. But it does make what goes into the application a lot more selective, a lot more important. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay.
And Sophia, I apologize for, again, limiting the time. I'm hoping then that may be a reason for people to contact you, and then, we can arrange more time.
Yes. There's a lot of questions was not able to answer due to time restriction. Feel free to scan the barcode on the right-hand side, and then that way we can continue that conversation. Also going to the WeChat group. Obviously, we will invite Professor An coming back again. We will invite him. Okay, Lucy, do you want to do some closing, or we're okay now? Thank you so much.
We're okay now.
Okay, thank you, Sophia, for having me. I'm sorry that my video camera is not working from my from my room, but again, thank you so much for having me.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Professor. Thank you, Professor Ann. And thank you, Lucy. And thank you, Allison, behind the scene. And thank you, all the parents are stay with us on the Saturday night to learn together and to getting more information to help our next generation. Hope all of us will be a rise above and get more smart and get more strategically helping our student going through that special period. And looking forward to see you guys again. Have a good night tonight. Good night.
Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.